Imagine going to an ATM to withdraw some money. You check your balance and discover that for some reason, there's way more in your account than there should be.
What's afoot? A lottery win? Unexpected work bonus? Death of an estranged millionaire aunt? No? Well, then maybe your bank's messed things up.
So it's moral dilemma time. What do you do? Tell the bank or take the cash?
In August 2018, that quandary gets put to the test on the streets of India.
Some normal people who were not involved in this gang, who were withdrawing money, they found that they could withdraw any amount of money. So they tried their hand out and they did some large withdrawals.
This is Inspector General Brajesh Singh. Remember him? The Indian action hero cop with the impressively thick moustache?
He led the cyber police unit tracking the raid on Cosmos Bank, and early on in the investigation, he spots something strange. During the heist, it seems some regular customers, about 100 of them, had gone to the ATM and discovered their bank balances mysteriously inflated.
Inside the Cosmos Bank network, the hackers had been carefully manipulating the CashPoint computer system so that it would grant unlimited withdrawals to their accomplices on the street. But as millions of dollars get pulled from CashPoints, things begin to fray around the edges. The hackers' shenanigans are affecting innocent people's accounts. Maybe when they were setting up the hack, the cybercriminals mistakenly entered some incorrect bank details. After all, it's easy to make a typo.
Our young hackers from North Korea might have given a windfall, accidentally, to some random strangers in India.
One local newspaper reported the case of a man who discovered his balance was 100 times what it should have been. Now, he didn't take any money. Instead, he told the bank.
But many others were not so honest.
They were not criminals, they're stupid people trying to take advantage of something that was happening there.
And so now, Brajesh has to find all these unexpected opportunists on top of looking for the gang of money mules who deliberately went out to rip the bank off. Plus, he needs to track down all the scam organizers who've been running the show.
How have the hackers found all the accomplices they need around the world to pull this whole thing off? Well, turns out the Lazarus Group has been looking for helpers online. And that's where this investigation takes another remarkable turn. We're talking fake film shoots, some of India's most notorious jails, and a deep dive into the dark web. From the BBC World Service, this is The Lazarus Heist, Season 2.
I'm Jean Lee.
And I'm Jeff White.
Episode 2, Big Boss.
The hackers who'd broken into Cosmos Cooperative Bank had a field day, approving CashPoint withdrawals around the world.
It was just like abracadabra. That within these 3 hours, you put these cards, put any PIN number, and you get money.
Abracadabra indeed. Brajesh is still trying to get his head around how the hackers managed to disappear close to $14 million.
How do you organize such a carefully synchronized global flash mob of crime? It's his team's job to find out, and they decide to start by focusing on the withdrawals that happened on their home turf in India.
About 300 fraudulent withdrawals had taken place in the country, across multiple cities and in different states. Poring over the data, Brajesh's team noticed that the biggest cluster of withdrawals happened in the city of Kolhapur in Maharashtra state, about 300 miles south of the bank's HQ in Pune.
Once they get hold of the CCTV footage from those Kolhapur ATMs, they can see the same small group of men making multiple withdrawals at different ATMs around the city, and they realize they're looking at just one small cell in this criminal flash mob covering just one city.
To find them, the police start looking at mobile phone data from cell towers in the area. Even when you're not using it, your mobile's constantly sending and receiving signals from nearby towers, and this leaves a log of which phones travelled where and when.
We gathered the dump data from wherever ATM locations were there, so we got a huge dump of numbers which were in that area on that line. From there, then we started applying, our algorithms to find out as to which numbers could have moved into this area or which are numbers from outside. And then we started doing technical analysis, and we understood that there is some commonality between a group of mobile numbers which is moving together. We also realized that these are new numbers. and also that these numbers were in communication with each other.
As in newly issued mobile numbers.
These are smart guys. Once the team was assembled, these guys, they took away their original phones. They gave them absolutely new phones.
What are known as burner phones. Phones criminals use a few times and then dump. When you take out a contract for a regular phone, the number can often be linked back to you, to your home address. But these burners are usually bought and topped up with cash, so it's much harder to connect them to the real identities of the owners.
So they were leaving no trace anywhere. Very smart guys.
Yeah, really smart.
So now Brajesh has to link these anonymous burner phones to actual people. So once again, he goes back to the map of the cell towers that those phones were connecting to.
Then we could actually also trace movements of these people. Sometimes you have, these CCTVs or cameras at toll booths and toll plazas where you get a visual on the numbers which are exiting or entering the city. So we saw that there were people, they were moving in a particular vehicle and that this vehicle was there in this particular city. Those CCTVs of these chaps actually, crossing the tall barrier, tall booth. It's very eerie that there's a group of people sitting in a single car and we can see that at this particular time they are entering the city to commit this great money heist. Very interesting to watch.
He's identified the car some of the gang are riding in, he's got CCTV of the car at the toll booth, and now he can go back to the CCTV from the cash points and see those same people. With these shreds of information, within a few weeks, the police make arrests connected to the Kolhapur withdrawals. Soon, they're making more arrests connected to withdrawals in other Indian cities: Pune, Mumbai, Jaipur, Indore. All the suspects are men, aged from their 20s to their 40s. And, according to Brajesh, they're not exactly hardened crooks.
They were general people. Somebody's a waiter somewhere, somebody's a driver.
One guy was a caterer, another had a pharmacy degree, another was a shoemaker. How did these ordinary folks end up suspects in an international bank heist?
One very funny thing which happened once we caught people and we were interrogating them, there were some people who were aware that they are part of a gang, but there were some people who were initially unsuspecting. So they were told that they are going for a film shoot.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This is kind of money heist,
Oh, I see.
Yeah, these guys were told that they are about to participate in a film shoot and they are going to Kolhapur for that.
So they want to film a scene of somebody withdrawing some money from a...
Yes.
Wow. What was their reaction when they discovered the reality?
I think probably once they were told that they're going to get money out of this, then they must have realized and decided to participate. They knew what they were doing.
Maybe it wasn't that hard a decision. The mules were reportedly promised the equivalent of $500 for their work. That's a huge payday for low-income workers in India.
Police discovered that each gang in each area had a local boss who was responsible for recruiting and handling these money minions.
And as they interrogate one of their suspects, they learn something amazing about how these handlers were able to manage the operation. Imagine you're taking charge of a hastily assembled gang of money minions. How are you going to make sure that they hand over all the cash and don't pocket any for themselves?
To help deal with this problem, police believe the hackers gave at least one of the handlers a special power.
The local chap who was handling operations in Maharashtra, he was also given a laptop to monitor what kind of money was being withdrawn. One strange thing we realized, one of the chaps, he tried to hoodwink this local handler. So what he did, he withdrew a particular amount of money. He came back to the car and he shows him less money. This guy gives him a tight slap because he was monitoring the transactions on his laptop.
A tight slap. That's Indian slang for a big smack across the face. And that laptop is an amazing detail. Brajesh thinks that the mule handlers were using it to communicate with the hackers in real time during the heist. So it's probably a treasure trove of evidence, but the cops haven't got it. That's because as the crooks sped away from Kolhapur, they tossed the laptop out the car window into a valley between the mountains outside Mumbai. Police apparently searched for it for a whole month. Maybe it's still there. So if you're listening and you do find it, please let us know.
Eventually, police arrest 18 suspects, alleged mules and their handlers. We'll come back to them in a bit. But first, let's tie up a couple loose ends. For a start, what about all those people we mentioned earlier, the ones who weren't part of the gang, but realized through some glitch that they could also make large withdrawals?
We also got them. They had to pay for it later on.
Okay, that's to pay the money back, right?
Yeah.
And what about Cosmos Bank, the target of all this? When the police caught some of the mules, they did get back a little bit of the cash, but most of the money from those 12,000 withdrawals vanished beyond trace.
And all the different companies and local banks that own those ATMs around the world have to be reimbursed for those withdrawals, even though they're fraudulent. So Cosmos Bank has to dig into its pocket and pay back every single dollar in all 28 countries, a big hit to their profits.
Okay, back to the 18 suspects arrested by Burjesh's team. What became of them?
I'm Nadeem, Advocate Nadeem Sheikh, practicing at the Bombay High Court and in Mumbai courts at the criminal side.
Nadeem represents two of the suspects in the case. The police say they were money mules in the Cosmos heist. They travelled from their hometown in a suburb of Mumbai all the way to Indore, an 11-hour drive, and together they're responsible for stealing the equivalent of $67,000.
But Nadeem says they're innocent, just two friends swept up in the investigation on what he claims is flimsy evidence.
We are just only going for total denial. We haven't withdrawn any amount, we were not given any card.
We wanted to speak with Nadeem's clients themselves, but that wasn't possible. Nearly all the Cosmos suspects are still in jail awaiting trial. We spoke to Nadeem to get a picture of the kind of people they are and what's happening to them now, 4 years after the heist.
Nadeem's clients are both in their early 30s. They've known each other since they were kids.
They live in the same locality. It's a small town, maybe you can say a kind of ghetto. They used to study in the same school.
One of them was bailed last year after spending 2 years in jail, but his other client is still in jail and has been there since he was arrested in 2019. Before he got arrested, he was working as an auto rickshaw driver.
It's a three-wheeler which is used for public transport here. So they hardly earn 2-3 pounds per day.
So he's from a fairly poor background from the sounds of it.
You can say that, yes.
Conditions in jail for Nadeem's clients sound pretty bad. India's got a nationwide problem with prison overcrowding, and the jail in Pune where the Cosmos heist suspects are being held holds nearly 3 times more inmates than its official capacity.
So you can just imagine how jam-packed it is.
So tell us about how the case goes on from now. What happens next? How long do you think it will run?
There are more than 190 witnesses in this case. So if the prosecution wishes to examine all the 190 witnesses, so it will take minimum a decade, at least a decade.
A decade, 10 years?
A decade, not lesser than that, yes.
Nadeem says that if the trial drags on for many years, the suspects will probably end up out on bail, eventually.
This is something I've noticed many times in the years I've been reporting on organised crime. It's usually the small fry, the meat space minions, who actually go down for these heists. The hackers so often escape justice. Yes, the low-order crooks are still criminals and should be brought to book, but it's depressing to see the hackers who pulled the strings remain at large, free to do it all over again.
This is a pattern I've also noticed with crimes involving the North Koreans. Remember that deadly poisoning of Kim Jong-un's half-brother? That was 2017 at Kuala Lumpur airport, when 2 unsuspecting young women, who say they were told they were taking part in a stunt for a TV show, were arrested. Those murder charges against them were eventually dropped, and both of the women have been released. But meanwhile, the alleged masterminds slipped away scot-free. North Korea has never admitted any involvement in the Cosmos Bank job or any other hacking scheme. The BBC put these allegations to the North Korean embassy in London and did not receive a response for the 2nd season of the podcast. But previously, Ambassador Che Il told us in a letter that his country denies accusations of hacking made by the United States. He calls them a farce aimed at tarnishing his country's image.
Indian police are still hoping for more cooperation with police forces around the world to help them trace the funds and catch all the Cosmos perpetrators. But so far, that doesn't seem to have happened. And you can imagine why. Most police forces have enough to investigate at home without taking on the case of a robbery that involves a bank from another country. That's part of the beauty of this job for the hackers, of course. Taking out cash in one country when the victim bank is in another, it's a great way to flummox the police investigation.
The Pune Cyber Squad may have reached a dead end with their investigation, at least for now. they haven't been able to trace the accomplices who ran the money muling networks in all those other countries beyond India. But this isn't the end of the story, because it turns out they weren't the only ones investigating the culprits. The Americans were also looking into this, and they gave these jackpotting operations the codename Fast Cash 2.0.
And that's how we can tell you the story of one of the Lazarus Group's accomplices, who ran their jackpotting operations in 2 of the 28 countries, the US and Canada. And it's a remarkable tale. Thousands of miles from India, a serial fraudster became a key linchpin in the Cosmos heist, and it changed his life forever.
To pull off the Cosmos Bank heist, North Korea's hackers had to find money muling networks in every single one of those 28 countries. How do you find people to work with, particularly if you're North Korean and can't even legally visit many of those places?
Well, there is somewhere you can go, if you don't mind rubbing shoulders with some deeply dangerous and unsavoury characters. In fact, we're about to take a trip there ourselves.
It is odd at first to see, heroin, cocaine, ecstasy all being sold very, very openly.
Imagine the most lawless place in the world. Somewhere where there are no rules, almost no limits on your behaviour. Say what you like, no matter how offensive. Buy and sell stuff you'd never get away with elsewhere.
It was a pretty bizarre world to be enmeshed in.
If you're picturing a dark backstreet criminal den, well, think again, because some of the most lawless places in the world aren't necessarily physical. They're in cyberspace.
My name is Eileen Ormsby. I'm an author. My specialty is the dark web.
The dark web. It's an important place in our story, like the places we visited in Season 1, Shenyang, Dalian, Macau. It's a place where North Korean hackers get their dirty business done.
It might not be a physical location, but the dark web functions like a different country. It's got its own culture, its own slang, its own currencies. Eileen Ormsby's a bit of a local, so we turned to her to be our guide.
How did you get interested in the dark web in the first place?
First happened around 2011 when I first heard about a website on the dark web called the Silk Road. I heard about it from people that were actually using it to buy drugs and have them delivered to their homes, and I thought that sounded quite insane, so I had to log on and have a look for myself.
For Eileen to get onto the Silk Road, this notorious online illegal marketplace she was hearing about, she couldn't just type the website into her browser.
Okay, quick explainer here. When you use the normal internet to visit a website, your device, your phone or your laptop or whatever, leaves a trace, your IP address, and that can sometimes be linked back to you. If you visit a dark website, however, your traffic to the site is encrypted, so it's pretty much impossible to find the IP addresses of people visiting dark websites. But you can't get onto these sites using a regular browser like Chrome or Firefox. You'd just see an error message. Instead, you have to use a special dark web browser called Tor.
And what Eileen saw when she first used this magical internet backdoor was pretty mind-blowing.
I found what really was a one-stop shop for every drug imaginable. The site itself looked like eBay or Amazon. They operated like any other e-commerce platform. The site brought together buyers and sellers, and the person that received the drugs would give them a rating out of 5. So it was literally like any other e-commerce platform that you can think of.
In terms of this site, in terms of law enforcement, I imagine they'd want to shut it down. Why couldn't they just go to Silk Road and close it down like they do with other websites?
Of course, law enforcement wanted to shut it down, so it was very obvious to law enforcement it was there. It was being advertised quite openly. It was being talked about in the news. But because of the way the dark web works, they're unable to find who is behind these websites and to shut them down. So the Tor network masks where these websites are hosted and who is behind them.
And this is the key thing about the dark web. It offers secrecy, privacy, anonymity. But it's not all about crime. There are some positive uses.
It's also used by whistleblowers. A lot of the major newspapers actually have a dark website that can be used to upload any whistleblower communications. The CIA has one so that you can upload information about terrorists.
Indeed, the US government has a dark web site where you can safely submit intel on the Lazarus Group for a $10 million reward.
But because of the anonymity it provides, the dark web is rife with criminal activity of all stripes. The buying and selling is all done using cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, digital money that's often impossible to link back to a person's real identity, so it too is anonymous, making the whole thing very difficult to police. Which is ironic, given how the dark web was created in the first place.
It was actually initially developed in conjunction with the US military, US Navy, I believe, to protect military secrets. The idea was to have very robust encryption, and anyone that was trying to intercept it could not see what was being sent through the Tor network. But the thing was if bad actors were watching the Tor network, they would know that anything that was going through there was in fact military communications. So what the military did was open it up to the world at large, so that in a way that they could get lost amongst the noise, so that, if the whole world is using it, then people that are spying on it won't know that, which is military communications and which is normal communications.
In a way, the US military opened a Pandora's box by inventing the dark web. US authorities eventually managed to shut down Silk Road in 2013 after a long investigation, but new sites keep popping up offering exactly the same criminal marketplaces. It's a game of cyber whack-a-mole, and it's not just drugs they're offering.
So you can go online, go on the dark web and do a bit of a search around. You'll soon come across something like a red room. A red room is where you pay to watch someone get tortured to death in real time.
Oh, God, really?
They're all fake. There's nothing real about them.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah.
They're just there to separate the gullible from their cryptocurrency.
Oh, I see. So you pay for access to this alleged torture scene, but then it never happens. You just lose your money. And you can't exactly go to the police and say, I was trying to watch some torture and I got ripped off.
No, well, that's right. And that's the same with the hitman sites. There's loads of hitman sites. Some of them look very sophisticated. And again, they have really good customer service, except when it comes to actually carrying out the hit, they don't do that. Their customer service doesn't extend that far.
The dark web is more than just a marketplace set up to cynically separate customers from their money. I've been on many of these sites, and what's amazing is the knowledge sharing that goes on. There are entire forums dedicated to swapping hacking skills. And if you can't learn the trade yourself, no problem. There's always a hacker or fraudster willing to help for a fee or a cut of the profits.
It is very much an underground business. There's vendors that are selling things like the hacked databases, malware, exploits, and often some of those vendors will have thousands and thousands of successful transactions, all 5 stars. So you can be pretty sure that vendor is someone that you might want to get to know.
But even for experienced researchers like Eileen and me, there's only so far we can go down these dark web rabbit holes.
Some of these forums, you need to prove yourself in order to, get invited into the deeper, darker parts of it.
They don't want journalists in there, and they certainly don't want police. You have to be vouched for. It's where you can go to find the most skilled accomplices, the people with the connections and resources to run global cybercrime operations. Just the ticket for a North Korean hacker looking for help with an international ATM jackpotting raid.
Tonight, I'll tell you how to send Western Union. Get a good CVV MasterCard. Make an email containing the credit card holder name. Make sure that when you enter the drop name, the last name matches the credit card holder last name. Select the fastest shipping method, card it, and you're done.
These jargon-laden posts are from a cybercrime forum called Card Club. It's a hangout for credit card fraudsters. The posts were written in February 2018 by a user calling himself Big Boss.
He's dropping tips on how to commit card crimes and, frankly, in the process, revealing snippets of his criminal past.
Big Boss has a particular set of skills. He not only carries out card fraud himself, he also has the equipment to make cloned ATM cards. Plus, he says he's got a group of money mules in the US and Canada who can go to cash points and make withdrawals using the dodgy cards.
Precisely the service the Lazarus Group needs for the raid on Cosmos Bank in August 2018. It's kind of funny, they were looking for a big boss to run their jackpotting operation, and that's literally who they got.
So, the Lazarus Group starts working with Big Boss. He's a key facilitator. Without him, the North American end of this operation just couldn't have happened. So who exactly is he, and what else is he up to? Well, luckily, I know someone who might be able to help us answer that.
Mike DeBolt. I'm the Chief Intelligence Officer at Intel 471.
That's a big U.S. tech security company.
Our mission is to be the eyes and ears, as we say, in the financially motivated cyber underground.
Before joining Intel 471, Mike worked for Interpol, the International Police Organization, so he knows his stuff.
And when we learned about the North Korean connection with Big Boss on these underground sites, Mike seemed the perfect person to turn to.
We have sources that are well placed that are interacting with these bad guys and eliciting information, and we make it our business to try to track them and monitor what they do.
We wanted to see if Mike could track down Big Boss for us, trace his backstory across the dark web. Could he do it?
Absolutely.
But it wasn't quite so easy. Turns out there are loads of people in the cyber underground calling themselves Big Boss. It makes sense. I mean, no one wants to be Little Boss, right?
But as Mike and his team dig deeper, they began to circle around one particular player. It turns out that our Big Boss wasn't just known as Big Boss. As Mike's team discovers, he had a lot of aliases.
I think we uncovered at least 20 different handles that he used across nearly a dozen different forums and instant messaging services. He was extremely active. You definitely got a sense that he knew his way around the underground.
Sometimes he went by G or Habibi or Backward. Mike's first task is to painstakingly match them together, linking them to our guy, the real Big Boss.
And it's helpful that Big Boss was sometimes a little sloppy.
In the different forums over the years, he would use the same email address. And so, I mean, basically he's being lazy. And we see this pretty commonly, you know, across different actors where they would change their alias on a forum, but they would keep the same email address. You know, one inbox is enough, right? So you don't want to have to keep, you know, track of 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 email addresses.
And what sort of services, when you found records of him online, what sort of services was he offering? What was his niche in the cyber underground?
He was very active for a considerable amount of time. So at least what we're seeing is at least 14 years. He organized money laundering operations, is what we call a mule herder. He maintained a bunch of fraudulent bank accounts. He used those to receive transfers from like other victim accounts that other hackers have compromised. So he or someone in his crew with the mule network that he established would then cash out the money.
Over the years Big Boss was active, Mike's research shows him getting more and more brazen, offering increasingly skilled services and getting access to more highly vetted and sophisticated criminal forums.
A lot of these sellers, you know, they rely on reputation and brand image. There's additional benefits of, you know, becoming more reputable and, you know, performing more activities on the forum and contributing. You get access to vetted and closed subsections of the forum, if you will. There's another incentive to do good.
Do good in inverted commas. Do good while doing bad, yeah.
Exactly. That's the cybercrime world, though, you know. Yes, these are criminals and their intent is pretty terrible, but at the core of it, they run some pretty, you know, decent business models.
I was on one of the forums and we were trying to sort of look at credit card crime and credit card fraud, and I'd got permission to make a small purchase of a stolen credit card, and I bought my Bitcoin and I bought I think it was credit card information from somebody and got ripped off, and the person just ran off with my money and I didn't get it. So I complained to obviously not saying I was a journalist, I complained to the forum administrator and said, this person nicked my money. And I got this response saying, oh, you know, very sorry about that. And, you know, we've blocked that member. They won't be back again. You know, please continue to use our forum in future. Absolutely astonishing.
Yeah, not all forums are made equal, but some of the better ones, they actually have, you know, legitimate customer service and complaint centers where there's actual repercussions for actors who are being extra naughty.
The whole point is to build trust, which is not easy in a world largely inhabited by criminals. Reputation is everything, which is why Big Boss spent so much time polishing his credentials.
No wonder the Lazarus Group's so keen on Big Boss. He's dependable, he's a one-stop shop for all the services they need for their jackpotting raid on Cosmos.
In fact, he would be a key part of their next bank raid. But this time, the shadowy dark web operator wouldn't get away with it. And Big Boss is about to be unmasked, along with his incredible backstory.
Hold on to your hats. For this next job, the world of nation-state hacking is going to collide with the crazy world of social media marketing. North Korea's hackers are about to crash into Instagram celebrity.
Before I knew who he really was, I would never imagine in my life that he was capable of doing what he did. You know, he's a pretty damn good actor.
That's next time on The Lazarus Heist.
The Lazarus Heist is an original podcast from the BBC World Service. I'm Jean Lee.
And I'm Jeff White. Our producer is Viv Jones.
Our original music was composed by Magnus Vines and Lee Il-woo from the South Korean band Jambanai.
And as ever, we'd love to hear your feedback. Keep leaving us those ratings and reviews. Let us know what you think of the season so far. And don't forget to follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And do also please spread the word on social media. We're using the hashtag Lazarus Heist.